Greetings, friends. I immediately ask you to share this video as much as possible, because publicity can make a difference. Today I want to talk to you about one anti-Ukrainian, albeit Ukrainian-speaking, propagandist and traitor to Ukraine. I am concerned about the second question, but actually this kind of hatred, anti-Russianness on the part of my compatriots. He urges not to fight against the so-called Russia, spreads fakes against Ukraine and says that we must immediately reconcile with the Russians, otherwise it will all be over. Well, you see, we have no chance to survive. What's going on, people? But, friends, what is important, despite the presence of criminal proceedings against him, which is currently being considered in court, this traitor to Ukraine quietly escaped from Ukraine. That is why I am now in the United States of America. I am now here in New York in Brooklyn. In Vienna here in New York in Brooklyn. I am in Turkey. Well, like any traitor to Ukraine who advocates the destruction of his own people, he really doesn't like those Ukrainians who helped their country. From all those Sternenkos, shelters and the like. Therefore, it is better, of course, that you have your own set, no matter how different such points of view are subjective. He urges you not to watch my videos, which means that it is definitely worth watching and worth subscribing right now to my channel. Also, like this video and leave any comment under it. So, the name of this traitor to Ukraine is Ruslan Kotsiba, and he is an anti-Ukrainian propagandist, as I said at the beginning of this video. But he was not always like that. At one time he even criticized Vladimir Putin. Putin is a neighbor, let's say a Kremlin dwarf, the president of Russia, the Soviet Union, a scoop. Good people, come to your senses. Now Kotsiba says that there was no revolution of dignity in Ukraine, but a coup d'état copyright tat. But earlier he was proud of the fact that he allegedly participated in the revolution of dignity. I am an active participant in all these revolutions, the revolution on granite, the Orange Revolution and the revolution of dignity. However, money was more important to Kotsiba than his position, and he happily went to work for Viktor Medvedchuk and became a presenter on his TV channel. Because the key to solving this armed civil conflict, I think so. Later, he received a notice of suspicion for treason, spent several months in a pre-trial detention center, then got out and continued his anti-Ukrainian activities. I am Ruslan Kotsiba, I am a prisoner of conscience, the first prisoner of conscience who was recognized in Ukraine by Amnesty International. By the way, it's true that Amnesty International recognized Kotsiba as a prisoner of conscience, they just signed up for an anti-Ukrainian propagandist, let's call a spade a spade. On the eve of the full-scale invasion, Kotsiba ran around the president's office and shouted about some kind of civil war there. The civil war is still a civil war in which Ukrainians kill Ukrainians. At that time, he did not give Ukraine a single chance, he said that we would lose the war in 2 or 3 days, and in general, how could we fight against the so-called Russia? Russia is a nuclear power. Who do you want to fight with, which army? And a real war, in which Ukraine has no chance. In the end, this scarecrow did escape from the territory of Ukraine, despite the fact that a case of high treason is still pending against him in court. And the most interesting thing is that he escaped from Ukraine to the United States of America with the help of the Biden program. The U4U program I was writing is called a humanitarian password. At the same time, he hates Biden, he also hates the United States of America, but he sits in the USA and says that Ukraine is not defending itself from Russian aggression, and that is all America is fighting against the so-called Russia. A proxy war is a war between Ukraine and Russia, it is a war between Russia and the United States. Rather, the United States is simply the main force in NATO. While running around the United States, Kotsiba continues to pour mud on Ukraine and says that only the Nazis are left in Ukraine. Neo-Nazis are back in Ukraine. Zelensky now wants to call neo-Nazism fascism, yes, neo-fascism, he is introducing a state religion. And here again an interesting point. A few years ago, I already made one issue about Ruslan Kotsiba, and then I noticed that this great anti-neo-Nazi actually professes the ideas of the Nazis. There is one very interesting nuance. Our anti-neo-Nazi Ruslan Kotsiba is so anti-neo-Nazi that at one time he was deprived of the Peace Prize because he spoke out against the Jews. He has contradictions almost everywhere, He constantly says that he is a representative of the pacifist movement, that he is apparently only for peace. But in fact he is for the defeat of Ukraine. Well, that's why I tell everyone, don't pick up a weapon. If there is an opportunity, let's say, to run away, to desert, that's normal. He urges Ukrainians not to defend themselves against Russian aggression, but when it comes to himself, when unknown but very good patriots visited him a couple of years ago, he somehow forgot all his pacifism and said that he would be ready to defend himself even by force. If he wasn't alone. Well, imagine what I was, and what I could do when I was alone and what I could do even if I were a super duper, some black guy there. Well, before going to work for Medvedchuk, this demonstrative pacifist wore camouflage. And together we will win. Glory to Ukraine. Now he is trying to use the mask of a pacifist to cover up his anti-Ukrainian propaganda and has another interesting associate who is completely gone. He appealed to us, to the Ukrainian pacifist movement. He also has one more associate. Together with them, he sat in the European Parliament and condemned the fact that the European Parliament called so-called Russia a terrorist state. Let's start with yesterday's vote, which completely eliminated any possibility of a diplomatic settlement. I mean this when the resolution of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, where 99 out of 100 voted for the fact that Russia is a terrorist state. This accomplice of the traitor to Ukraine Kotsiba is another traitor to Ukraine, Kirilo Molchanov, who is also Medvedchuk's propagandist, and now you won't believe it, he is sitting in Moscow and goes to Solovyov, where he talks about the terrible Ukrainians and the sorrows of the Tatars. Either the Satanists or the dark demons came. Radayan spoke about the death of the Tatar ruler by a purely terrorist method of action. Now, actually, about why I shot the issue about Ruslan Kotsiba in the first place. If he was some kind of petty propagandist, maybe I wouldn't have paid attention to him. But he is currently abroad, constantly and very actively working against Ukraine, communicating with European politicians, such as a deputy from Italy. The sanctions were not thought out, because Putin gained even more from these sanctions. Although I must admit, his negotiations were not very successful. Kotsiba himself was upset that not everyone in the European Parliament supports his anti-Ukrainian position. Disappointed, deeply disappointed. Sorry. They have no adequate perception here at all. Kotsiba very consistently continues to promote anti-Ukrainian narratives and says that Ukrainians should not fight for their country, because the Russians will not touch you if you are a civilian.